Welcome to the program, and this is a continuation of our two-part series on cleanup of Lake Victoria and utilization of its resources. Last week we tackled the real cause of the water hyacinth on the lake, and we learned that it's all about what happens upstream from farming activities to soil erosion and industrial effluent. All that feeds the hyacinth, to the extent that just removing the hyacinth from the lake is not the solution. The solution lies in tackling the problems upstream. Today, we take the discussion to another level. A pale shadow of its former self.
Tunakuwa na muda mwingi sana wa kucheza kwenye magumaji mpaka hii meli ije malize gumaji ingie kwenye sehemu nzuri. Na pale meli ukiangalia inakuwa inasafa sana. Injini zinalalamika.
We used to be actually fighting for berthing rights here because there's so much of movement of cargo coming in and moving to Mwanza, Musoma, and from Uganda into hinterland.
Is it possible to revive maritime transport on the lake?
The economy of Kisumu, then, when Kisumu was vibrant, was dependent on the Kenya railways then, and of course the ports and harbors.
I think maritime transport would be, I would call it the low-hanging fruit that we have.
Welcome, I'm your host Alex Chamwada, and we begin with some facts about the lake.
Lake Victoria is the second largest freshwater lake in the world after Lake Superior in North America. It is also Africa's largest lake and the largest tropical lake in the world. The lake has a surface area of 68,800 square kilometers, which is about the size of the Republic of Ireland. Lake Victoria is located in East Africa and is shared by Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. The three countries share the lake in percentages of Kenya 6%, Uganda 43%, and Tanzania 51%.
The Kenyan part of the lake, the 6%, is heavily impacted by the population, by the socioeconomic activities, and by the topography. And that's why there is a lot of sediment and there are so many challenges on that small portion of the lake.
It is estimated that 80% of the water in Lake Victoria comes from direct rainfall, while the remaining 20% emanates from rivers and streams that flow into the lake. Geological studies indicate that the lake has dried up a few times in the past. The most recent time it dried up is 17,300 years ago. Lake Victoria is greatly vulnerable to climate change due to its shallow depth, vast surface area, and limited inflow. The main environmental concerns that affect the lake are pollution and invasive species like water hyacinth. For the Chamwada Report, I am Michael Zimanchi.
Welcome to Mbita in Homa Bay County, one of the 5 counties that border Lake Victoria. And this side of the lake is clear. No water hyacinth. Area residents, especially those in Siaya and Homa Bay counties, depend on water transport to travel to places like Takawiri, Rusinga, and Mfangano Islands, as well as Luanda Kotieno. There are 2 water buses operating along those routes. The water bus is currently considered to be the most efficient and safest water transport mode on Lake Victoria. It combines speed, comfort, and safety to give travelers seamless connections between the various islands on the lake.
I perceive it safe because they have lifesavers, the jackets, there are plenty as compared to others where you don't even have one.
Motorboats, on the other hand, are many.
Nimeshafanya hii kazi, nikapata pesa nikatengeneza vitu zangu ya kusomesha watoto wangu, pia wanaenda shule vizuri.
That gives us a feel of water transport on the Homa Bay side of Lake Victoria. Compare with what is happening at the Kisumu port in Kisumu County, and the difference is like day and night. While the Homa Bay side is breathing with freshness, the Kisumu side is choking with the water hyacinth.
You see, the water hyacinth has been coming all the time. It's not that this is the first time it has come in. It's an occurrence that happens. It's like an annual occurrence kind of a thing. You come along somewhere in, by April, May, half of this or maybe more of this would have moved away. But it doesn't actually leave the lake. It just goes and settles itself on the other side, maybe Kinduku or on the Gulfs on the other side. It's just about the wind direction. You'd be surprised. If we get a couple of strong storms in the next few days, you might feel half of this has just floated away, but it's still a menace.
While the invasive weed migrates along the lake depending on water currents, its negative impact on water transport on the lake is huge. Current statistics are worrying. According to satellite images released by the Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute, the area covered by the weed increased from 6,142 hectares on February the 11th to 7,583 hectares on February the 15th this year. Once in a while, you will find one or two operational ships here, like this one that is being loaded with fertilizer destined to Uganda.
Kunapokuwa na migugu maji kama hii hapa, tunakuwa na muda mwingi sana wa kucheza kwenye magugu maji mpaka hii meli ije imalize magugu maji ingie kwenye sehemu nzuri. Na pale meli ukiangalia inakuwa inasafa sana. Injini zinalalamika, zinaunguruma mpaka zina hanti. Sasa inafika hatua nyewe wenyewe mnachanganyikiwa, na wakati mwingine meli kama haiko strong, injini zinazima. Na cooling system kama iko tofauti, ina maana meli inavuta uchafu, na system kwenye cooling zinaenda water jacket zinaingiza uchafu, na pampu inafikia hatua zinazima. Kwa hiyo hii kitu inatuathiri sana, lakini sidhani kama ndio inazuia bandari kuwa bize. Nafikiri bandari kuwa bize ni changamoto tu za kibiashara na mwenendo wa biashara nchi kavu jinsi inavyokwenda.
The economy of Kisumu then, when Kisumu was vibrant, was dependent on the Kenya railways then, and of course the ports and harbors. Now with the collapse of the East African community and the collapse of the Kenya railways as we knew it then, it meant that the port of Kisumu, the activities and everything had to come to a halt. And it has been like this for quite some time. Very little activity, if any. But now with the coming of county governments, okay, we decided as a county that for us to revive the economy of Kisumu, we have to rethink our strategy in terms of the resource, the biggest actually that we have as a county, that is Lake Victoria. But then when Professor Peter Nyang'nyong'o was campaigning for office, he did say that he would love, to revive the economy of Kisumu. And one of the, his agenda was to ensure that we rid the lake out of hyacinth. We dredge the lake to achieve sufficient depth to allow big vessels to be able to dock. And that dream of Kisumu County, that dream was now picked by the Lake Region Economic Bloc. So now, Alex, the issue of the revival of maritime transport and trade is one of the flagship projects of the Lake Region Economic Bloc that, as you know, comprises 14 counties.
The 14 counties are Kisumu, Homa Bay, Migori, Busia, Siaya, Trans Nzoia, Kericho, Bomet, Nandi, Kisii, Nyamira, Bungoma, Vihiga, and Kakamega.
Out of the 14, 5 counties actually share this resource. We have Busia sharing this resource, we have Siaya sharing the lake resource, we have Kisumu, we have Homa Bay, and we have Migori. We call them the riparian counties.
The structure of the Lake Region Economic Bloc is very unique, that governors sit among themselves and they call it a summit. In the summit they have a chairman, who they elected now this time is Wycliffe Ambesa Oparanya, who also became the chairman of Council of Governors. Then the vice chairperson of the bloc is Governor Laboso of Bomet. And in the structure we also have assembly caucus, which have 10 leadership of assembly per each county. So that's 140 assembly people. They meet 4 times a year. The assembly is very important here because, like if there's a major project that the counties want to participate in, it has to go through the budget. And that budget must be passed through assembly. And then we have the LREC, the Lake Region Economic Bloc Economic Council. This is the one which is mind-boggling, the one that creates economic mind. And then we have the secretariat. Then we have a council. Council is the county secretaries and the ministers of finance, because these are the guys with the executive powers and control on planning and finance department.
Revival of transport on Lake Victoria is one of the flagship projects of the Lake Region Economic Bloc.
We have a directive, both from the governor, from the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, and from the president, that all agencies, including the regional bloc and the county, must now think together. So our only term of reference, as we speak now, despite the fact that we all have what we need to do in our individual capacity in our organizations, is to rid the lake out of hyacinth and to dredge. That's all that the principals want to hear now. That's all that the president wants to hear. That's all that the governor wants to hear. That's all that the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga wants to hear. Are we removing the hyacinth? Are we desilting? Are we dredging the lake? Then from there, all other things can be done.
So far, nothing much happening on location. The old water hyacinth harvester is unreliable, but the Kisumu deputy governor says real work will begin soon.
We expect bigger machines, more machines in 3 months, okay? And we are giving ourselves 15 months to be able to complete this work, both the harvesting of the water hyacinth and dredging, and to allow time for construction of the new port as we await the arrival of the SGR. That machine is the dredger. It's one. We're expecting 2 more dredgers. And Alex, you know that we're not just dredging this section you are seeing here. We are talking about the Gulf. The Gulf of Lake Victoria on our side of the lake is about 62.5 kilometers that we must dredge all the way to Homa Bay. The company that is coming to help us sort out this issue is from Uganda. It's called the Mango Tree Group. The machine that you are seeing there, the big one, is from the Mango Tree Group. And the Mango Tree Group are already setting up camp around the lake. They are setting up, you know, an area where they'll be able to assemble, by the way, and where they'll be able to anchor the big machines that are coming, because as you know, this is Kenya Ports Authority yard. So they're going to have their own yard.
The national government and the 14 counties under the Lake Region Economic Bloc are the key drivers in the revival of marine transport on Lake Victoria. Other stakeholders are the parastatals that are linked to marine transport, including the Kenya Maritime Authority, Kenya Ports Authority, Kenya Railways, Kenya Pipeline, the Lake Basin Development Authority, and the Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute. At the regional level, all governments and the East African community are also important partners.
Under the blue economy, the water-related economies, I think maritime transport would be, I would call it the low-hanging fruit that we have.
We need more marine vessels. We need more people to train the marine industry so that we work in a professional way.
Imagine the number of trucks carrying these liters of oil on our roads to Busia and Malaba to Uganda. It's a waste of time, money, and fuel, and it is just obsolete.
On that note, we take a short break. When we return, the expected benefits of marine transport on Lake Victoria. Welcome back. We are discussing reviving transport on Lake Victoria. The potential is enormous. Stakeholders are many, and here is the business case that is being advanced.
The Kenya Pipeline has now built a huge tank in Kisumu. The tank is ready to pump oil into big ships, and big ships that can carry even 4 million liters of oil to Uganda and Tanzania. You see, Uganda alone consumes 4 million liters of oil in one day, and an old fashion of trying to transport oil. So the big ships of tank and or big tanks can now will easily transport oil from Kisumu pipeline to Uganda, and it finds its way to Rwanda, Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Southern Sudan, and Mwanza and Musoma, those ports of Tanzania. That is a major milestone for the port of Kisumu.
Other than water, other than fisheries resources, another very huge potential that we have for the lake is the lake, what we call maritime transport, the transport in the lake. Because given this massive amount of water, we can actually have our regional goods moving very, very cheaply. Because if you compare transportation in the lake with the maybe transportation on road, there are so many advantages. Accident, you hear every time people losing life on the roads. But if we are to move our goods, and you know the beauty is that the lake is highly interconnected. You can actually get goods from Mombasa to Kisumu, put them on the ship, they go to Port Bell, they go to Mwanza, they go to Bukoba, and they'll find their way up to DRC Congo. So I look at that as a very huge potential.
In around 2005, the World Bank estimated that the number of containers that pass through Malaba to Uganda alone, because this one was recorded for Uganda only because of tax, are 600 per day. Forget about those who are going to Rwanda. That statistic has not been collected well. To Tanzania, to Rwanda, to Southern Sudan and Congo and Burundi. So to process one container in Malaba can even take you over 7 days. And the cost of processing that is $1,000 and above. So if you go past the days you are supposed to have processed, you pay extra fee, $200. You go to Malaba and you find a full container with containers that are stuck there, without warehousing, without everything. And those trucks are just sleeping there. Drivers are drinking and waiting for the day they'll be cleared. It's a waste of time, labor, and money. The same applies to Busia. And with a ship, it takes only 12 to 16 hours to be in the port of Mwanza, to be in the port of Musoma, Jinja, and Port Bell. So you see the cost reduction and the wastage of containers and the delay of delivering of goods and wasting the roads, of the Kenyan roads. So the business case for the lake transport is very important. But all these ships and these activities cannot take place because the Kenyan side of the lake is shallow. It has rocks, it has, the rivers are feeding with a lot of silt. So the lake must be dredged, must be dug 63.7 kilometers from Beta, which joins to the open waters of Lake Victoria, all the way to Kisumu. So the dredging must be at least 8 meters deep and 80 meters wide, with navigation lamps all the way leading it to the Kisumu port. You see, navigation lamp must be there because that pathway has a lot of rocks. And this big, imagine a big ship with 4,000 liters, 4 million liters of oil hitting a rock and spilling in the Lake Victoria. That's a disaster. So there must be a clear pathway to lead the ship out until it reaches the open lake. And this dredging must also be around the Kisumu port area. Now the Kenya pipeline has dug 3.5 meters. But for you to service the oil ships, it has to go deeper because in the dry season, the lakes go shallow.
Observers say the biggest challenge will be moving from paper to reality. Goodwill is important, and the East African community is expected to play a key role in lobbying for government support.
One of the first things we did, we realized if people have to invest in transport within the lake, we must have a legal framework. And we established actually an act. There's an act that was enacted in 2007 called the Lake Victoria Transport Act. It provides a legal framework for movement of goods within the East African countries. Then we also developed regulation for that. So with a framework, that was done. Now the other challenge that we have to contend with is that the mapping of the lake, the routes, developing charts for navigation in the lake. The one we have are quite old. And we are now having a process that we are going to ensure that they are updated so that navigation in the lake can be cheap.
Our roads have become very unsafe, very congested, so many accidents. You've seen tankers bursting into flames. And so we are saying we don't need to, to have roads that are that dangerous. One of the ways of making our roads safer would be to have a functional port. So the goods from Mombasa will come inland to Kisumu through the railway. We know that railway transport is much, much safer than road transport. Then once the goods reach here, we want to take those goods to the other counties that share the lake through the lake, and to the other countries also who share the lake through the lake. That will save a lot of money in terms of the money we use for even repairing of the roads. So this is going to be a big, it's a game changer really for our country.
In the early years, I saw the whole thing taper down by the time we came down and got into 2004 and 5. Everything has just literally come to a churning halt. We had much more operations coming up here. Railways were touching down here. The key route to the whole thing was when the railways stopped. the goods which are flowing in for imports from here going into hinterland actually came down to a churn. And that became the biggest issue as far as the port is concerned. Otherwise, we used to be actually fighting for berthing rights here because there's so much of movement of cargo coming in and moving to Mwanza, Musoma, and from Uganda into hinterland. So with that now I'm being told that the railway is also being revived. So with that and this collective efforts which are being made, I think we can foresee a good growth on the waterfront.
In a summary, the removal of the water hyacinth will be the first step in the long process of reviving maritime transport on the lake. The next step will be dredging to increase the depth of the harbour, then the construction of the port, which is expected to coincide with the completion of the SGR to Kisumu. Safety at the same time is a key component of the project.
We are even putting aids to navigation equipment, and we have a program under the African Development Bank that is going to support us come up with what is called maritime rescue coordination centers to ensure that we are able to respond to alerts, accident alert immediately. To an extent that we have even gazetted a number 110. It is not operational now, it will be operational once the centers are operational, where a fisherman can actually be able to sound an alarm and will be able to know it. But most critical, I think the fact that we have a legal framework, I think to me that is very important, because then we have laws governing maritime transport in the lake.
Once the railway is rehabilitated, the Kisumu will be one of the busiest ports in East Africa, because all the goods, people will monitor their goods maybe from China all the way to Mombasa on the train to Kisumu.
A pale shadow of its former self. That's how many are describing Kisumu Port. But its glory could come back if the promises made become a reality. And that's within the context of a regional approach to reviving the lake. And that's how we wrap up our show today. Many thanks for watching, and bye-bye from Kisumu.